In the quiet stillness of an early morning at Riverside Park, a young black boy moved between benches, picking up empty cans. He hoped it might ease his grandmother's burden, even a little. But then he stopped. Just ahead, a pregnant woman was clearly in pain, possibly going into labor. People around her kept walking, watching, but doing nothing. Without a moment's hesitation, he ran to her side. He never imagined one small act of kindness could change his life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The sun had barely risen over Maplebrook when the soft rattle of aluminum cans echoed through the still air of Riverside Park. The morning haze hung low, silver threads catching the first streaks of light as they stretched across the cracked concrete paths and dew-kissed grass. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour, too early for joggers, too late for the night wanderers. A worn-out shopping cart squeaked along the gravel, its wheels sticking occasionally in the grooves of uneven pavement. Pushed by a boy who looked smaller than his 12 years, the cart bore the rusted scars of long days and longer nights. Tyrese Walton moved with purpose, his steps measured, practiced. His small hands, calloused beyond their age, reached down to collect another can, his eyes scanning instinctively for glass bottles tucked under benches or discarded near trash bins. He wore a faded hoodie with holes at the elbows and sneakers held together by more faith than fabric. Strapped to his back was a fraying backpack filled with empty bags, a plastic water bottle, and a small notepad where he kept a running tally of every item he found. His self-made system, his way of keeping order in a life that rarely offered any. The park, nestled on the edge of downtown, sat like a forgotten memory, where the clean-cut borders of wealth met the frayed edges of the working poor. Further east, glass buildings gleamed like polished teeth in the morning light, but over here even the pigeons seemed to move slower. Tyrese didn't mind. This was his route, the one he walked every morning before the city fully woke up. He bent down to pick up a Sprite can near the fountain, its metal cool against his skin. A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant fried food from the 24-hour diner his grandmother, Miss Althea, used to work at before her knees gave out. Now she stayed home, her body too tired but her mind still sharp, still full of stories she whispered at night, when the bills piled up and the lights flickered like dying stars. Tyrese did this for her. For the pills they sometimes had to choose over groceries, for the gas bill that came red-stamped and final, for the roof that leaked when it rained too long. He didn't complain. This was their life. This was how you survived when no one came to save you. As he moved past the old swing set, he caught sight of a woman in yoga pants and a designer windbreaker walking a purebred golden retriever. She glanced at him once, then pulled her dog a little tighter, crossing to the other side of the path as if his presence was something contagious. Tyrese didn't flinch. He was used to the stares, the looks that measured his worth by the stains on his sleeves and the color of his skin. He learned long ago that people didn't see a boy when they looked at him. They saw a threat, a warning, a reason to keep their windows rolled up. He passed a park bench where a young couple sipped lattes from biodegradable cups, laughing softly as they scrolled through their phones. Neither of them looked up. To them he was just background noise. That was fine. Being invisible had its uses. As he neared the footbridge that crossed over the duck pond, Tyrese paused, his breath catching slightly from the weight of the cart and the chill in the air. He looked out over the water where the early light shimmered like a broken promise. His fingers tightened on the handlebar. Another hour and the park would fill with joggers, dog walkers, city workers on their breaks. He needed to finish before then, before people started acting like he didn't belong here. Because they always did. Just last week, a groundskeeper had stopped him near the north entrance, barking at him to get lost. "This ain't no place to be hustling, kid," he had said, his voice thick with condescension. When Tyrese tried to explain, to say he was just collecting recyclables, the man's face twisted with disgust. "I don't care what you're doing, go back where you came from." Where was that exactly? Tyrese hadn't figured it out yet. All he knew was here, this park, this cart, this hunger in his gut that never really left. He rolled his cart forward again, the rattle of cans like a rhythm he could trust. Somewhere behind the trees a baby cried, somewhere ahead a new day waited, and Tyrese Walton, barely 12, all heart and bone, kept walking. On the bench beside her sat a small brown paper bag, still warm with grease spots at the bottom. An unopened bottle of juice rolled slightly with the breeze, as if someone had left in a hurry but planned to come back. She glanced at it once, then closed her eyes like she was trying to steady herself. A paper bag rested beside her on the bench, its bottom darkened with grease spots. An unopened juice bottle rolled gently against the leg of the bench. It looked like someone had just stepped away. Tyrese noticed her. She was sitting alone near the railing, dressed in sleek athleisure, one hand resting on the small of her back. She looked like she was waiting for someone, but her shoulders were hunched, her breathing too fast, too shallow. Something was wrong. Her shoulders were hunched, her breath too fast, shallow and uneven. Her other hand clung tightly to the metal railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Maybe her husband had just stepped away. Maybe he hadn't seen this coming. Neither had she. Tyrese slowed, squinting. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. And something in the way she swayed told him her body was about to betray her. He looked around, hoping, expecting someone else would see it too. There were people nearby. A jogger running in place a few feet away. A middle-aged man reading a newspaper on a bench. 2 teenage girls taking selfies under a tree. But none of them looked at her. None of them moved. Tyrese's heartbeat picked up. A voice echoed in his head, his grandma's voice, quiet but firm, worn from years of surviving. Don't get involved, baby. Folks like us don't get to make mistakes in front of people like them. And yet, something deeper, something older than fear tugged at him. Maybe it was the way the woman's knees buckled for a split second, or the panic that flickered across her face as she gripped her belly and gasped. He didn't think, he just ran. The wheels of his cart squeaked violently as he let go of it mid-path, sprinting the last few feet and catching her just as her legs gave out. She collapsed into him with more weight than he expected, nearly taking them both down, but he planted his feet, wrapped both arms around her, and held her steady. Her body trembled, her skin clammy beneath the sweat-drenched sleeves of her jacket. Tyrese could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, each beat jagged and off. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice breathless but sure. "I got you." The woman's eyes were glazed, unfocused, her lips parted like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Her fingers dug into his shoulder, her knuckles white. "You need to sit down," Tyrese said, guiding her toward the edge of the path. They lowered together slowly until she was sitting against the railing, still breathing hard, one hand cradling her swollen stomach. He looked around again, more desperate now. "Hey!" he called out to the jogger. "She needs help!" The man hesitated, gave a fleeting glance, then looked away and turned up the volume on his headphones. "Can someone please?" "She's not okay." Tyrese's voice cracked as it rose, but the park remained unmoved. People watched now, yes, but like spectators, not participants. They stayed back, they stayed safe. His hands were shaking as he reached into his backpack and yanked out a half-double bottle of water. He twisted the cap off and gently tilted it toward her lips. "Here," he said. "You gotta drink something." At first, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, her head tipped forward and she took a small sip, coughing slightly but managing another. Her breathing eased just a little. Tyrese crouched beside her, sweat breaking across his own forehead, not from exertion, but from the heat of so many eyes watching yet doing nothing. He pulled out a wrinkled cloth, an old dish rag his grandma used for cleaning, and gently dabbed at her forehead. "Don't pass out," he murmured. "Please don't." Suddenly the woman gasped, a raw, urgent sound that sent a chill down Tyrese's spine. She grabbed her stomach with both hands, her eyes wide now, full of fear. "Cramps," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not right." Panic rose in Tyrese's chest like a tide. This wasn't just dehydration or exhaustion. Something was wrong, really wrong. He reached for his pocket, then cursed under his breath. He didn't have a phone. The one he used had cracked beyond repair 2 weeks ago. "Somebody call 911, he shouted, spinning toward the small crowd that had gathered but still held their distance. "She's pregnant. She needs an ambulance." There was a pause, a long and terrible stillness where the only sound was the woman's ragged breath and the distant call of a crow overhead. Then, a woman in a tennis visor finally lifted her phone, murmuring into it with disinterest like she was ordering lunch. Tyrese turned back to the woman, her face pale, her body curled into itself. Her fingers reached for his again. "You're not alone," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you." And he meant it. Even if no one else cared, even if the world was too cold to see her, he would not let her fall. Tyrese barely had time to breathe before he heard the heavy thud of approaching boots against concrete. He didn't even need to turn around. He could feel the presence before the voice came, sharp, barking, already coded in assumption. "Hey, step away from her!" Tyrese's spine stiffened, but he didn't move. The woman's hand was still wrapped around his wrist like a lifeline, her fingers trembling against his skin. He tightened his grip around her shoulders and slowly turned his head. The man towering over him wore the uniform of a city park security officer, badge glinting in the sunlight, jaw clenched, hand already hovering near the radio strapped to his vest. He wasn't looking at the woman. He was staring straight at Tyrese, with a gaze that saw no context, no nuance, only threat. "I said back away, kid," the guard snapped, stepping closer. His hand twitched near his belt. Tyrese's throat dried. "She's not safe, she needs help," he said, voice steady but shaking at the edges. "I'm helping her." The guard snorted. "Help? You expect me to believe you were helping her? What were you doing, waiting for her to drop her purse?" The words hit like stones. Tyrese felt them land in his chest, heavy and cold, even though he'd heard variations all his life. He could hear them in every store alarm that chirped only when he walked in. He could see them in every car door locked when he crossed the street. But this time it wasn't just him. The woman was in pain, her face contorted as another cramp rolled through her. She moaned, a sharp, desperate sound, but the guard didn't even glance her way. Tyrese rose slowly to his feet, not to challenge, not to escalate, but to protect. His body formed a barrier between the guard and the woman who was barely staying conscious. "She's pregnant," he said. "She almost collapsed. I caught her. She needs an ambulance." The guard's mouth curled in distaste. "And I'm sure you just happened to be here, right? Just another good Samaritan with a shopping cart full of trash." His gaze dropped to Tyrese's clothes, to his dirt-streaked sneakers and worn hoodie, and Tyrese could see the silent conclusion in the man's eyes, that he was lying, that he didn't belong here, that a black boy on his knees next to a white woman must be trouble. A small crowd had begun to gather at a distance. Most of them stood in clusters, whispering behind hands, some with their phones raised, not to help, but to record. The guard took another step forward. "Back up," he said again, this time more forcefully. His fingers twitched toward his radio. "Or I'll call this in." Tyrese's heart pounded, his muscles tensed, torn between fight and flight. But the woman's body leaned into him again, a weak cry escaping her lips. She needed him, not a guard with suspicion in his eyes, not a camera held by someone waiting for drama. Him. "No," Tyrese said, louder now. "I'm not backing up. She's not safe, and you're not even looking at her." The guard's eyes flared. "Watch your tone." "You watch her?" Tyrese shot back, anger rising like fire behind his ribs. "You've been yelling at me, but she's sitting right here, can't breathe, holding her stomach like something's tearing inside, and you haven't said a single word to her." His voice cracked at the edge, thick with frustration and disbelief. "Why? Because I don't look like someone who would help?" There was a pause, brief, but thick enough to cut with a knife. The guard stared at him, face unreadable, but his silence said more than words ever could. And then the woman stirred again, managing to lift her head slightly, her voice hoarse and small. "He helped me," she whispered. "He's the only one who did." The crowd grew quieter. A ripple moved through them. Uncertainty, discomfort, maybe shame. Tyrese didn't know. He didn't care. He just dropped to his knees again, brushing her damp hair back from her forehead. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're going to be okay." Somewhere in the distance, faint but growing louder, came the shrill wail of an approaching siren. Help was coming. But Tyrese knew, deep down, that help should have come sooner. It should have come from the people who walked past. From the man with the badge, from a city that said all lives mattered but never proved it when it counted. He sat there on the cold concrete, a 12-year-old boy with nothing but calloused hands and a stubborn will, holding on to a stranger in pain as the world looked on and judged him for doing the right thing. The sirens were closer now, pulsing through the air like a heartbeat, steady and urgent. Tyrese kept his arm around the woman's shoulders, steadying her as she shivered with another wave of pain. Her grip on his sleeve had loosened but never let go. The guard hovered nearby, radio clutched in his hand but silent now, jaw clenched as if unsure whether to retreat or double down. The crowd had shifted too, still distant, still watching, but the expressions were different. The camera phones lowered slightly. Some people looked uncomfortable, others confused, like they were slowly realizing they'd chosen to stand still while a boy fought to keep a stranger alive. Someone from across the park, maybe a cafe worker or a jogger, had shouted for help. Or maybe Riley had seen the growing crowd and knew something was wrong. Then came the sound of fast-approaching tires. A black SUV turned sharply onto the curb. Riley must have driven himself back the second he saw the commotion from across the street. The back door flew open before the vehicle had fully stopped, and a man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed, every inch of him brimming with urgency and power. He looked around in panic, scanning the crowd until he saw her on the ground. His pace quickened, eyes wide with alarm. His eyes locked onto the woman on the ground. "Clara," he shouted, rushing forward and dropping to his knees beside her. She turned her head weakly, her lips parting in a gasp. "You came back," she whispered. I waited. I thought I'd be okay." "I didn't want to bother you," she added, her voice trembling. "It just hit all at once." Tyrese froze. Riley, that name hit like a spark in the back of his mind. Riley Westwood, founder and CEO of Verdance Technologies, the man whose face was plastered on billboards all over downtown, the man who'd just been profiled on a magazine cover titled The Future of Green Wealth. And now, here he was, kneeling in the dirt beside his wife, brushing a trembling hand across her cheek, eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" Riley asked, voice low, controlled but barely. "Clara, baby, talk to me. What's wrong?" "She collapsed," Tyrese said before he could stop himself. "She could barely stand. I caught her before she hit the ground. She's been cramping. Something's wrong." His voice shook under the weight of what was unfolding, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "I gave her water. Tried to keep her awake." Riley's head turned slowly, as if the words needed time to reach him. When his eyes finally met Tyrese, something shifted, subtle but definite. He looked at the boy, really looked at him, not just the hoodie, the dirt on his hands, the rust-colored stains on his knees from the concrete. He saw the tremble in his fingers, the worry etched into his young face. He saw the boy who had knelt beside his wife while everyone else had done nothing. Not an adult, not a medic, just a boy in torn shoes who didn't wait for permission to care. Riley felt something shift inside him, a respect that had nothing to do with age or title. Then Riley's gaze shifted to the guard, who stood stiffly at a distance, still gripping his radio like a crutch. "What did you do?" Riley asked, his voice colder now, quieter, deadlier. The guard straightened. "Sir, I arrived to find this kid hovering over your wife. I was trying to secure the situation until—" "Secure the situation?" Riley cut in, voice sharp as a blade. "That kid is the reason she's still conscious. Did you even check on her?" "I was following protocol," the guard replied, but his voice faltered. "No," Riley snapped. "You were following prejudice." The ambulance finally pulled up, two paramedics leaping out with practiced urgency. One of them dropped to his knees beside Clara, already pulling out equipment, checking vitals. The other nodded at Riley. "Sir, we'll take her now. Do you want to ride along?" "I'm coming with you," Riley said, his tone leaving no room for argument. As they loaded Clara onto the stretcher, her hand slipped from Tyrese's arm, but before they wheeled her away, she turned her head again, weak but deliberate. "Him," she whispered, pointing. "He helped me. He stayed." Riley reached down, placed a hand on Tyrese's shoulder. His voice was quieter now, but every syllable hummed with something deep. "What's your name, son?" "Tyrese," he said, barely above a breath. Riley nodded once. "Thank you, Tyrese, for seeing her, for not walking away when everyone else did." The weight of it hit Tyrese all at once, not the praise, not the recognition, but the relief. Someone finally believed him. Someone with power, someone who hadn't started from suspicion. The ambulance doors closed, the siren rose again, and they sped off, red and blue lights bouncing across the park trees. The crowd began to dissipate, the spell broken. The guard quietly stepped back, his authority cracked. And Tyrese stood there in the middle of it all, still gripping the bottle of water he had offered like it meant something. His heart was pounding, his knees aching, his mind spinning with everything that had just happened. But for the first time that morning, maybe for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like a problem to solve or a shadow to avoid. He felt seen. By the time the ambulance disappeared down Maple Avenue, Tyrese was alone again. The crowd had scattered, absorbed back into their routines like nothing had happened. Like a woman hadn't nearly collapsed in broad daylight, like a child hadn't stood between life and indifference. The security guard was gone too, slipping off quietly the moment Riley's back had turned. All that remained was the soft squeak of Tyrese's abandoned cart and the breeze rustling the branches overhead. He stared down at his hands, dirt beneath the nails, sweat clinging to the creases, knuckles raw from gripping too tight. He didn't feel heroic, he felt exhausted. He was about to retrieve his cart when a voice called out from behind, "Hey, wait up!" It was a woman in jeans and a denim jacket holding a small camera rig and panting slightly as she jogged up to him. "You're the one who helped her, right? The woman who collapsed?" Tyrese blinked, unsure what to say. I guess." The woman smiled, a little breathless but sincere. "I'm with Channel 7. I was nearby getting some shots for a city piece. I saw what happened. The way you jumped in, how you held her, it was incredible." He stiffened. "I wasn't trying to be seen." "But you were," she replied gently, "by the people who needed to see it." Within hours, the footage was everywhere. A shaky video posted to social media showed Tyrese kneeling beside Clara Westwood, his arms supporting her as the crowd lingered at a distance. Another clip captured his voice, strong and furious, confronting the guard who hadn't even looked at the woman in pain. "You've been yelling at me, but she's sitting right here, and you haven't said a single word to her." That sentence played over and over, on phones, on TVs, across news broadcasts with captions like, "Boy saves billionaire's wife after park collapse," and 12-year-old hero confronts indifference. Some people called him brave. Others called him a symbol. A few called him a fluke, but all of them had something to say now. The headlines spread faster than Tyrese could make sense of, and for the first time in his life, the city of Maplebrook couldn't look away from him. He stayed home the next day. His grandma, Miss Althea, sat beside him on the worn couch, staring at the TV like she couldn't believe the boy next to her was the same one being praised by morning anchors. "They're calling you a hero, baby," she whispered, brushing his hair back with fingers that had wiped 1,000 tears in their time. Tyrese didn't reply. He didn't know how to feel about being called anything at all. All he had done was what felt right. What hurt was knowing how many others hadn't. Later that night, a knock came at the door. A man in a clean gray suit stood there, polite and serious. "Mr. Westwood sent me," he said. "He'd like to meet you again, personally. Tomorrow, if you're willing." Tyrese glanced at his grandmother, who watched the man with cautious eyes. Then he nodded once. "Okay." As the door closed behind the visitor, Tyrese sat down at the kitchen table, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. It wasn't fear, not really, but it wasn't excitement either. It was something in between, like standing at the edge of a place he'd never been allowed to enter and being told for the first time, "You can come in." Not because someone felt sorry for him, not because they wanted to save him, but because he had earned it on his own terms, even when no one was watching. For Tyrese Walton, the world had changed, but so had he. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual, like the sky was holding its breath. Tyrese sat stiffly in the back seat of a town car, his knees pressed together, hands fidgeting in his lap. Miss Althea sat beside him, her Sunday-best coat wrapped tight across her shoulders, a silent strength in the way she held her chin high despite the worn seams of her gloves. The driver said little, polite but distant, navigating the clean, tree-lined streets of Westbrook Heights, where the sidewalks gleamed and no one picked through trash cans for recyclables. As the car pulled into the private drive of the Verdance Technologies campus, Tyrese stared up at the glass and steel monolith towering above them, its mirrored surface catching the morning sun like it was built to reflect only power. This was a world carved from wealth, a place that had never made space for people like him. But today he had been invited in. They were greeted at the entrance by a tall man in a slate-gray suit. Mr. Keller, the same man who had knocked on their door the night before. "Mr. Westwood is expecting you," he said, guiding them through the vast marble lobby. Every step echoed. Tyrese kept his eyes forward, even as people glanced sideways at his scuffed sneakers and thrifted jeans. No one said anything out loud, but he could feel it, the dissonance of him in this space. He felt like a mistake walking on polished stone. They were led to the top floor, to a corner office with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing the city below like a miniature world. Riley Westwood stood by the window, phone in hand, his silhouette sharp against the skyline. He turned when they entered, setting the phone down, and for a moment he just looked at Tyrese, not with pity, not with obligation, but with something more focused, earnest. "Miss Althea," he said first, shaking her hand gently, "it's an honor." She nodded, her mouth tight with caution. Then he turned to Tyrese. "You came." Tyrese didn't know how to answer, so he nodded once, his shoulders squared as if bracing for something heavy. Riley gestured toward a pair of soft leather chairs. "Sit, please." Once they did, he leaned forward, folding his hands together. "I won't take much of your time. You didn't ask for any of this, Tyrese. You didn't do what you did for a reward. That's exactly why I believe you deserve one." Tyrese stiffened. "I didn't come here for anything. I saw she needed help." Riley's expression didn't change. "Exactly. While others stood still, you moved. That means something to me. It means something to Clara. She's recovering well, by the way. She wanted me to tell you that herself." Tyrese looked down, the knot in his chest tightening. "So," Riley continued, reaching into a drawer, "I want to offer you something. Not charity, not a favor, a chance." He slid a folder across the table. "Verdance sponsors a scholarship program for underrepresented youth in STEM. We work with a select group of students each year, hands-on education, mentorship, full academic support, and access to the best resources in the state. We're offering you a spot, starting this fall." Tyrese blinked, staring at the folder like it might vanish if he touched it. "Me?" he asked. "Why?" "Because you're sharp. You think fast under pressure. You care when others don't. That's leadership, Tyrese. That's brilliance. You've already proven more at 12 than some people do in a lifetime." Beside him, Miss Althea's hand reached for his. It was trembling. "And for you, ma'am," Riley added, turning to her. "Verdance is opening a new community outreach center. We need a trusted voice, someone with roots in the community, someone who understands resilience. We'd like to offer you a position, coordinator, part-time or full, salary, benefits, no strings." Her breath caught, her mouth opening in stunned silence. Tyrese couldn't speak. The folder still sat untouched. It all felt too big, too sudden, like standing at the edge of a wave about to swallow him whole. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice small but steady. Riley smiled, not smug, not amused, but genuine. "You work hard, you show up, you keep being who you already are. That's the only catch." Tyrese looked at Ms. Althea. Her eyes were glassy now, but her nod was sure. He reached for the folder. The cover felt warm beneath his fingertips, not because of the sun pouring through the windows, but because it felt like possibility. Real and terrifying. He took a breath. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Riley smiled again, this time like something important had just begun. "Good, then let's get started." 1 year later, the sky over Maplebrook shimmered with the soft blush of early spring, the kind of morning that made the air feel alive. The wind carried the scent of clean pavement, blooming dogwoods, and something else. Something hopeful. Inside the newly opened Verdance Community Innovation Center, the lights were warm, the walls lined with photographs of local families, student inventions, and community-led projects. At the center of the main hall stood a small stage, modest in design but grand in feeling, as dozens of people filled the room, murmuring with pride, curiosity, and anticipation. Tyrese Walton stood just off to the side, smoothing the front of the button-up shirt he had borrowed from the donation closet weeks ago but now called his own. His shoes pinched a little, still new, still stiff, but he didn't mind. His hands, once calloused from gripping rusted cart handles, now held the edge of a note card. The ink was slightly smudged from how often he had folded and unfolded it. From across the room he spotted Miss Althea, standing near the entrance in a navy blue blouse with gold buttons, her hair pressed and pulled into a neat bun. She stood beside a group of women from the neighborhood, smiling, beaming even, as she pointed toward the plaque near the door that read, "Community Coordinator Althea Walton." Tyrese swallowed hard and looked back at the crowd. His name was being announced now, the words echoing through a microphone he still wasn't used to, and now, presenting his first research project as a student of the Verdance Young Innovators Program, Tyrese Walton. He stepped forward, not rushed, not small. His shoulders were straighter now. His walk had weight. He moved past the rows of professionals in sleek blazers, next to fellow students in neatly ironed uniforms, and up to the center of the stage where his model stood waiting. An intricate system of filters and recycled materials, designed to purify rainwater for use in underserved neighborhoods. The applause settled and silence followed. The good kind, the kind that meant people were really listening. He took a breath. "When I was little," he began, voice clear though soft, "I used to push a cart through Riverside Park every morning. I collected cans to help my grandma with the bills. I never thought anyone would care about what I knew or what I could do. People looked past me, they looked through me. But one day someone needed help, and I was there. Not because I knew what would come next, but because it was right." He paused, eyes scanning the room, catching Riley Westwood in the front row beside Clara, who sat now with their baby daughter in her lap. "That moment didn't make me special," Tyrese continued. "It just reminded people that kids like me exist. That we see things, that we care, and maybe, if we're given a chance, we can do something with that." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the model behind him. "This project is about turning what's overlooked into something that saves lives, kind of like people, I guess." The room stayed quiet for a second longer, as if no one wanted to break what had settled in the air. Then came the applause, not polite but full, rising like a wave, like affirmation. Tyrese smiled, not wide, not flashy, but real. Afterward, as the crowd mingled, Riley approached him, holding 2 cups of punch. "I don't think I've ever been that proud of someone I didn't share a last name with," he said, handing one to Tyrese. Tyrese chuckled softly. "Thanks. I still can't believe this is real sometimes." "It's real," Riley replied, "because you made it real." Behind them, a new sign was being mounted in the hallway leading to the youth lab. Simple black letters against brushed metal. "The Tyrese Walton Youth Lab, for those who refuse to walk away." Tyrese turned back toward the center, the hum of voices wrapping around him, the smell of possibility thick in the air. This place, this life, wasn't a gift. It was a door, and he had kicked it open with nothing but instinct and heart. He still remembered the feel of that cold pavement beneath his knees. He still remembered the weight of being looked at like a mistake. But now, he also knew what it meant to be believed in, and for the first time Tyrese didn't feel like he was visiting someone else's world. He was home. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.